There seems to be a trend now of dancing on the graves of conservative talk show hosts. I get a little irritated by that sometimes because good decorum shows that you show a little respect in certain areas regardless of where the people were politically. Of course, that's going the way of the dinosaur because of postmodernism. Postmodernism says we take our own values. We make our own values. If we define our form of hatred as being okay, well, hey, that's okay. The idea of self-restraint, decorum, things that were very, very important in the country at one time, they're not important anymore. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Steel on Steel, taking the 30,000-foot view in economics, politics, and religion. Steve Schiller producing, John Leffler here. This is Good Friday, so we'll acknowledge that. G. Gordon Liddy died this week, and I used to listen to his talk show quite a bit. I really liked listening to him from the 8 to 9 o'clock hour when he would read from various newspapers around the country. That's all he would do. He wouldn't take calls. He would just read from these newspapers of stories that he thought were significant in not only just the wire services, but like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and make comments on them. It was really an interesting hour. Sometimes when I would be driving in to do my talk show, I would be listening to the morning talk shows, because our show was a 4 to 6 p.m. drive time talk show, and I would be listening on tape as I was making the 35-minute drive to the radio station of everything the major hosts had talked about that morning. So when I would get on the air, I would know what had happened in the morning on talk radio in Denver, Colorado. And I would be able to speak intellectually to that. And if you didn't like what they did, you just hit the fast forward button, even back in the days of cassette. Tom Hanks really did something that was interesting in his latest film. Well, it wasn't his latest film, 2020. He's had a couple that came out, News of the World, Bios, and then Greyhound. And Greyhound features him as the captain of a destroyer, escorting all the merchant ships across the Atlantic during warfare when the German wolf packs were attacking them. And they managed to sink a submarine. At that time, of course, his crew cheers. They did their job. Congratulations, you got it. And then he makes a comment. Yes, 50 good men lost their lives. And he understood that war is a terrible thing. We do what we have to, and we should congratulate ourselves when we do a job well done, but also mourn for the other side. It's a very Christian approach, by the way, in which, as the captain there, he prays at least, 1, 2, 3, 4 times during the entire movie. That there is a moment of decorum. When Alan Colmes died, I was very sorry to see that. I remember he used to be on with Sean Hannity and Colmes on Fox. And Colmes died from cancer, as I recall. And I was just sorry to see that. I mean, I didn't like a lot of his views. Sometimes he made sense. Sometimes I just said, Alan, you've lost it. Shut up. But we had this decorum that I think was really important. What happened? The change of the teaching of ethics and morality. And ironically, the last time I had G. Gordon on the show, that was the last time I talked to him, we were discussing his book, When I Was a Kid, This Was a Free Country. And the conversation began with a borlog on my part, telling everybody how we had actually gotten through these changes, in particular in education, to get our kids to the point where they can't read, they can't write, they can't spell, just look at the blogs. They have difficult time thinking outside of consensus collective. They don't know very much about history at all, and what they think they do know is mostly politically correct, and dissenting views are not allowed. And that was my lead-in, and that was the beginning of my conversation with Gordon Liddy about When I Was a Kid, This Was a Free Country. So, while you are listening to this, since a lot of talk show hosts are passing on, I am going to check my blood pressure here and just make sure that, oh my gosh, look at that. It's the same as the inside of a neutron star. Oh, well, I got to go figure out what to do about it. Here's the rerun. When I was a kid, this was a free country. Interview with G. Gordon Liddy. In thinking about all of this, I realized that most people don't remember what it was like way back when. And I ran across a book. We get a lot of books from booking agents and things like that here at the show. And lo and behold, in the front door walks a book entitled When I Was a Kid, This Was a Free Country. And it was written by G. Gordon Liddy. Most people know who that is, the gentleman involved in Watergate and also host of a national radio program. And I generally don't do celebrity interviews. They have their own shows and they have their own platforms. I'm always aiming for content, not for the person necessarily. But I thought I would see if I could do this one. And G. Gordon agreed to do the interview, and we're managing to reach him on a cell phone right here out in the middle of nowhere. So if we have some connect problems, I think you know why. But, G. Gordon, is it a fair representation to say that the problems that we have are because the youth of today and a lot of the XYZ generation crowd don't simply remember what it was like to be in a free country at some point?
Yeah, that is a very fair observation. As a matter of fact, young people of today, when they read of the liberties that I had as a boy, they're just astounded. It's unimaginable to them, the absence of restrictions, regulations, and all the rest that we had. We were truly free. It was wonderful.
You tickled my heart. Before I went into radio, I was going to be a chemist. And you could walk into a chemical supply store, and I could buy a big chunk of potassium or sodium. I didn't have to fill out all the paperwork. I didn't have to do all of this stuff. No one was looking over our shoulders. And Bonner County, to my delight, a few years ago, which is north of us here up by the Canadian border, actually threw the building commission out.
Wonderful.
And I said, well, that was quite a bit of panache. You know.
Oh, boy, I think I'm moving.
My daughter's in her third year of college, and I read through the history book that she was using in college at the time. I read the whole history of the 20th century in this textbook, and they couldn't find a thing good to say about the U.S. and a thing bad to say about communism.
Wow.
And I suddenly began to realize why we are where we are.
Yeah, that's just appalling. Well, you know, I think that at the core of all of this is the massive failure of the government school system, the public schools. When I was a kid, you could get a really good education in the public school system, or at least in most of them. Now, a rare exception when not obtained. There are exceptions, but mostly it's failed. You walk down the street and ask some young person, where's Boca Raton? Well, he'll tell you it's a suburb of Venezuela someplace, I mean, it's just unbelievable. You look at the cashiers, if you want to call them that, behind the counter at a McDonald's or any of those fast food places. There are no numbers on the cash register. There's a picture of a hamburger. You push that button, and up comes the thing, and someone hands them the change, and they push a button, and it tells them how much change. They can't do those calculations in their head. In schools, they're allowed to use calculators now. Well, what happens when the battery dies, It's just appalling.
You ever watch them go into gridlock when the cash register fails?
Oh, sure. I mean, when I was a kid, we'd go into the A&P, which was a big chain in the East in those days. And my mother would order, from the clerk, and he'd pull it all down, and then he'd take out a brown paper bag that he was going to put it in. Before he opened the paper bag, he put it down on the counter, and he'd just go right through and write down the prices of everything, draw a line under it, and instantaneously do the arithmetic. And they could all do that, because that's what, they learned how to do that in school. To this day, I do arithmetic in my head.
Yeah, and you're able to count it. You remember how we used to count change when you did retail sales? You start from the amount, and you work upwards to the amount they gave you, just in ever-increasing denominations of coins or bills or things like that. I actually showed a teenager how to do that behind the counter a couple of weeks ago. And I said, here, this will help you. This is how you do it. I produced another show called the Financial Sense News Hour, and the host of that one, Jim Paplava, walked into a McDonald's or an Arby's or something, and they had like 2 for $5 type of things. So they ordered 2 of the 2 for $5, and it came up $12.50. I mean, when they punch in the system. And so he says to the kid behind the counter, he says, now look, wait a minute. This is $5. 5 times 2 equals 10. And the kid says, well, that's what the cash register says. So he said, well, call the manager over. And they point at the manager. And the manager says, well, if the register says it's $12.50, it's $12.50.
Oh, my Lord.
That's what he said.
It's really something. But I don't know. It's hopeless, I think. Math, history, English. And one of the problems you have with the Second Amendment is that nobody realizes that the group of words in the first part are nothing more than a present participle. They never heard of a present participle. They don't know what it is. That's the difficulty that you have.
Right.
I just can't emphasize enough how much damage the collapse of the public school system has done to this country.
When you talk about it being hopeless, I have some countermeasures to that. I have realized that in education, and we've covered large issues here on the show, there is no recovery for government education. I finally call it government education because the public has no control any longer over what goes on in those schools.
The teachers union runs it.
Teachers union, think tanks,
Ford Foundation, Carnegie, Department of Labor, Department of Education. It's an integrated network of elitist type of thing.
Right.
But we do see some hope in private schooling.
Oh, yeah.
Because these kids, and in homeschooling.
I agree.
But even here in Idaho, where we base the program, we began to see a movement last year. Let's start regulating the homeschoolers, because there's this mentality that we just can't get along without somebody from some government agency telling us what to do.
Yeah.
How did you ever grow up, G. Gordon?
Well, I went to private schools at all times, and they were unregulated. The way the teachers' union has it rigged now, for example, would not be qualified to teach opposition.
Let me ask you something. The situation in certain areas is hopeless. Do you know why it's hopeless? Because the educrats used to talk about getting rid of defective teachers. And the defective teachers, when the new elitism came in, starting around the 60s and the 70s, and we switched from teaching facts to teaching psychological issues and values, attitudes, beliefs, that type of thing.
Yeah.
They wanted to get rid of the defective teachers. And the defective teachers were the ones who remembered how phonics was done and how, all of the traditional ways of education that really worked. But if nobody remembers those days, if you or and I are the only remnant that remembers, nobody knows what good education was. Nobody remembers what freedom was. So how do you ever get somebody back to it? I think I lost his cell phone again right now.
This is awful. I'm way out here in the boonies, and, I don't know where the next cell tower is.
Do me a favor.
Yeah.
People do not remember what freedom was like. People do not remember what good education was like. Those who do cannot get access to their school boards and things. You wrote your book. What was the purpose in writing it? Because you're at least recalling to mind those things we all remember to have been true.
Yes. Well, I'm attempting to reach young people. As I said, they would be just stunned to realize the liberties that I had when I was, a kid. And I want them to understand that there wasn't one single dramatic wipeout here. Each one of these liberties was, in its turn, individually carved out and abandoned, always in the name or interest of some perceived good or other. And it's still going on. And if it's to be stopped, these kids are going to have to be the ones to stop it. So I thought I would shock them into realizing what's happening to them by showing them what I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's always the important thing. I tell my children that I've got 3 teens. And it's like, this is what we did. This is what my parents did. These were the things, and this is what it was like. Because we're losing it fast. I don't know if you've noticed it. The war on property, the seizures of properties, either for alleged crimes or for wetlands or for the new beltways we're setting up, we're under public domain. We're losing the property. We're losing our ability to carry arms. And listen, if the Beltway snipings haven't showed us one thing, it's that we need to start carrying arms again.
Absolutely.
It goes on and on and on and on. But because the government schools haven't taught people why the Bill of Rights are there, or that they're the product of long dead white slaveholders.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're in real trouble. But see, we don't teach history anymore, or we don't teach accurate history anymore. So that the young people don't understand why the Second Amendment was there. They don't understand that it has really nothing to do with hunting, nothing to do with self-protection or anything else. It has everything to do with, once again, being able to overthrow a tyrannical central government, which the framers had just done with respect to the government of George III, and they were very suspicious that the new government they were forming might become tyrannical, and they wanted the people to be able to overthrow it again.
Right. But it would seem if you're going to achieve what you're talking about with the youth, we've talked about it here, we almost have to start a counterculture. And it has to be small because you can't do it through the only thing that has saved this country so far, and I just got through talking with one of my contacts in Great Britain and compared the two, and that is we had a vibrant internet counterculture and a vibrant talk radio culture that grew up and did an end run around the gatekeepers. Other than that, in a counterculture, I don't think you're going to succeed in that effort.
Well, I agree with you, and of course, this is why the attacks by President Clinton and by Tom Daschle on talk radio. They can't control it. They're not controlling it, and it makes them crazy.
Yes, as President Clinton called it, hate radio. Remember right after the bombing of the Murrah office building, he called it hate radio.
Attacked me by name, and Daschle has now attacked Rush by name.
I think most of these issues have been kept alive by talk radio.
They have been, and we really are able to do things. The arming pilots thing, I mean, a year ago, forget about it. There was no way you were going to get the pilots armed. And I had pilots on the program, and I asked my listeners nationwide, to call in to the House of Representatives, and we turned the vote in the House of Representatives around and got that one. And then subsequently we got the Senate, and now we've got armed pilots. So we can be effective, and we are effective. And that's what makes the Dashels of this world so upset.
Which is also what makes me very nervous about any effort to control the Internet. I'm even concerned, there's always a fight from the conservative right about porn on the Internet. The problem right now is we're watching porn begin to link up with what's called hate speech. And once you allow hate speech censorship like the European Union's doing right now on the Internet, then the question is what constitutes hate? And lo and behold, all of a sudden, it's somebody's political views rather than genuine hate.
Well, yes, not only that, but look at this, the zero tolerance for weapons in the school. And so a kid draws a picture of a gun, and under the zero tolerance against weapons program, he's thrown out of school. That's what can happen. I would rather have a free and unfettered Internet. If you don't want pornography, don't click on it.
Yeah, or at least control where your kids click.
Yeah, well, there's programs for that. You can get programs for that.
What would you recommend for people? You obviously have opinions. People hear you every day on your show. What is it we most urgently need?
We most urgently need to break the back of the teachers' unions so that we can regain control on a local basis of the government school system, and then just go back and get 30-year-old textbooks and start using them again. Start educating these young people.
Yeah.
They are woefully ignorant, and that's a huge danger.
We were watching you on the cable channel the other night, and I even forget the show. The show's all become a blur after a while.
Yeah.
But you were fielding a bunch of questions, and I turned to my wife. I said, he had a Catholic education, so did I. And I said, I can see the didactic wheels going around in his head.
Yeah, I was educated by Benedictine monks and Jesuit priests. And boy, they really taught you how to think.
Right, that was the clarity. Today, everybody asks not how you think, but how you feel.
Yeah, right.
And when somebody says to me, well, I think, that's normally what they're not doing.
Yeah, well, the new math, don't you? 2 plus 5 equals 7. How do you feel about that?
Yes, exactly. There's the, we had the whole thing about Enron and WorldCom and the others. There's the old story about the CEO who was hiring a new chief financial officer, and the first one comes in, the candidate, and sits down, and the CEO says, how much is 2 plus 2? And the guy says 4, and he said, thank you, you'll be hearing from us. Next candidate comes in, and he says, how much is 2 plus 2? And the guy says 5, and the CEO says, you can't even add, get out of here. And finally, the third candidate comes in, and how much is 2 plus 2? And he looks up, he says, well, what number did you have in mind?
There you go.
All right. I know you're busy, G. Gordon. Where do people get your book? Obviously online, right?
You can get it online at Amazon.com. You can go to my website, which is LiddyShow.com, and you can click on it there. You can go to LiddyBooks.com. You can click on it there. And, of course, in any of the major bookstores. But you'll have to conduct a fugitive investigation. A lot of them are run by liberals, and they hide it.
That's really true. There is not a commitment on the liberal side of the ledger to free speech. If you don't believe me, go to college campuses as a conservative speaker.
Right.
That's where you'll find how far free speech goes. And by the way, that was an important concept. And that is where hate speech and tolerance and diversity and all this have short-circuited us.
Yeah.
Is we are no longer free to debate things in an open society.
That's right. Although, and I've done it. Been there, done that, got the T-shirt here in the United States. But 2 weeks ago, I lectured at Oxford, at the Oxford Union. And that was great. They turned 150 away at the door. People were climbing in the windows to hear, and I got a great reception because over there in Oxford, the object of the exercise is still to debate ideas, the crucible of debate.
Right, but look at the difference what happened when Hanana Ashrawi from the PLO was speaking at Denver University. There was a peaceful demonstration protesting her presence. When Benjamin Netanyahu tried to speak in Toronto, the riot was so bad he couldn't speak.
Yeah, and Netanyahu is a good friend of mine, and he's just terrific. He's a really smart guy. He's very eloquent.
I still think you need to go back to reading a full hour of news on your program. That was such a relief for me when I was driving in to do my show.
Oh, thank you.
What you did is you saved a lot of reading for me. I figured, well, he'll go through those papers. I'll look somewhere else for the rest of the stuff. And if I miss something, G. Gordon will pick it out for me, you know.
There you go.
Yeah, so I guess I owe you. G. Gordon Liddy, when I was a kid, this was a free country. It was when I was a kid, too. I remember that. And I'm hoping every time I meet young people, I talk to them about things of this nature, or I try to get them beyond where they are right now, because I believe sort of a countercultural type of movement among young people is what's important. Whether or not the culture as we know it shipwrecks or not, it's important to have this countercultural idea, because there will be a need for stability, and the common slop of thinking today cannot provide that. And we've always made it through every century. There have been problems that looked horrible in every century, but you know what? God is always there with each of us for those who call upon Him. And in the end, that is what we are really called to do, to stand and do what we are called where we are, and to look to Him and to be with Him in the end. I was thinking of something about the Washington Post. That was my conversation with G. Gordon Liddy on December 14th, 2002. The last time I talked to Gordon. I did say before we got on the air, I said, Gordon, your hairstyle, we have similar hairstyles. Do you just shower or do you buff it at the end, meaning we don't have any hair? So that was good. But every time he would read from all these news sources on his radio show, and he would get to the one where he'd read a story out of the Washington Post. Used stuff from the Washington Times, too, which he liked. But he said when he got to the Washington Post, he would say, and now we have a story from Washington's quaint little hometown newspaper. He wouldn't name it, but you knew exactly what he was talking about. So I can see why they would put a hit piece out on him about little Liddy's running everywhere anyway. So we'll say goodbye to G. Gordon Liddy. This is Good Friday. Please have a blessed Resurrection Sunday weekend. And remember that the reason for the season, that sounds Christmassy, doesn't it? The whole core. I had a Jewish friend one time say, what is Christianity all about? And I said, it really revolves around just one thing. Is he who he said he was? Yes or no? Everything revolves around that one question. And the same thing for the issue of the resurrection. If Jesus did not rise from the dead, if this did not factually really happen, all of us who are Christians, we're just wasting our time. But if he is who he says he is, and it says in Romans 10, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. That's the entire Christian message, saved from your sins. God bless you all this weekend on behalf of our staff, which I put that in loose quotes. Yeah, I know. I put that in loose quotes, right? Steve Schiller produces the show. Brad Grant handles all of our internet traffic in and out, as well as customer service. Robert Leffler does a lot of our editing and or handles all of our disc duplication for people. He just happens to be my son. And my wife and lifelong companion in radio, television, and marriage, Carol Leffler. Listen, on behalf of all of us, we appreciate the work that they do. We appreciate your listenership. Have a blessed weekend. Please be safe. Lord willing, we'll see you again next week. We're at SteelOnSteel.com. I'm John Leffler. The program is Steel on Steel.